What's the urgency, Les?
I want you to get Elliot Carson a pardon.
On what grounds?
No evidence. He didn't kill his wife. I'm prepared to make a statement as to who did.
As your attorney, I should point out to you, you may well be taking an irrevocable step. One that could write fini to life in Peyton Place.
Catherine's dead. I've lost the mill. I may have lost my sons. There isn't much left of that life to fight for.
All right, Les. Tell me about it. Say it any way it comes to mind. Not in sequence. We fix that later.
I loved my wife once. I want you to believe that. When Catherine and I were first married, I loved her. I loved her very much. It's not easy to explain why you do the things you do.
Leslie, what you tell me this afternoon will become evidence in a court of law. Now, it is not the function of that court to make a moral judgment. It will concern itself with the facts of murder.
My relationship with Carson's wife was more than I told you it was.
And this relationship with Elizabeth Carson had been going on for how long before the date of the murder?
3, 4 months, I don't remember exactly.
Long enough for Catherine to have found out.
All right, go on.
The point is, Catherine demanded that I break it off. All right.
The mill?
That, Rodney, everything. Everything. I called Elizabeth. I knew I had to break it off with her. But knowing Elizabeth, I felt I had to do it in person. As gently as I could.
I see.
You think so?
So, you went to the beach house.
I told Catherine I would have to see Elizabeth once more. Once more. She didn't believe me. She knew I didn't want to break it off. She knew I couldn't. Oh, yes, Ted, I have my weaknesses.
I never doubted that, Leslie. You went to the beach house.
Late that night. Too late that night.
Leslie, what are you saying?
But I finally went there, Ted. After having a few drinks at Ada Jack's bar. No one came to the door. I opened it. Now you know.
I don't.
Catherine was there.
Catherine?
Looking as though she'd been standing there for a long time. As though she'd been frozen to the spot. Like she'd been turned into a statue. She still had the poke in her hand. I'll never forget that tableau as long as I live.
You are making the statement that Catherine killed Elizabeth Carson?
She admitted killing her. Type it up any way you want to and I'll sign it. But fast. Don't give me time to change my mind.
You are saying that when Paul Hanley testified he heard Elliot Carson's voice, he was mistaken.
He heard my voice.
Raised in an argument of such intensity that it frightened him and impelled him to rush out of the back door and go to his father for help?
We screamed at each other, with Elizabeth's body lying there between us.
The other voice Hanley testified to having heard was that of his sister.
He was just a kid at the time, shocked out of a deep sleep. He heard a woman's voice. I suppose it never occurred to him that it wasn't his sister's.
Leslie, he stated unequivocally that he heard Elizabeth's voice, not Catherine's.
Are you suggesting that I'm lying?
I'm questioning the plausibility of Paul Hanley having been mistaken on 2 counts.
In other words, you think I killed Elizabeth? That I'd palming the crime off on my dead wife who can no longer defend herself? never occurred to me that that's what people would believe, regardless of the truth. Regardless of anything I say. So what am I accomplishing, Ted?
What you set out to accomplish when you called me in here? Clearing Elliot Carson.
What is it, Marion?
I just checked the hospital again, sir. Elliot Carson has had a relapse. His condition is critical.
What I've just told you, does it come under the classification of privileged information?
What are you getting at?
Legally, Ted, is it confidential or isn't it?
In the strict legal sense, it could be regarded as confidential, yeah.
Let us keep it that way. Until we see what happens.
Thank you very much, dear, but there's just too much work to do. I've got all the bills to post and all the
Mother,
other...
will you stop it, please?
The fact is, I just don't feel up to facing lunch right now.
That's what you said about breakfast. Now, you've got to eat something.
My daughter, the nurse.
Even a nurse's aide can tell you that you can't go on like this much longer. Mother, will you listen to me? What you need is some fresh air, so we're going to walk home and I'll fix some lunch. I don't want you to end up as a patient in doctor's hospital. Now, come on.
Rodney.
Hello, Mrs. Anderson.
We were just leaving.
I didn't know you'd be here.
It was my lunch hour, what's left of it. Mother will have to hurry.
If you want to see Dr. Rossi.
Mrs. Anderson, I came to see you. To ask you some questions about last night.
Hasn't she been through enough, Rod?
Look, you both have been through a lot, I know, and believe me, I don't want to make it any harder.
Then why do you?
Betty.
Mrs. Anderson, did you talk to your husband last night after the shooting?
Yes, I talked to him.
Well, then you know his version of what happened.
Yeah.
He didn't tell you anything?
He couldn't tell her anything. He didn't even know her. They've taken him to White River. He's in the prison psychiatric ward.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you? After all, my father did try to kill your father last night.
Yes, and I'm trying to find out why.
I'm afraid your father is the only one that can tell us what really happened.
Well, I've talked to my father, but I have a feeling he's holding something back. Look, I want to know all about this thing.
Why? So you feel less guilty?
Okay.
I didn't mean that the way it sounded. You see, I know how you feel. I've been over it 100 times, wondering how much of it was because of us or annulment. How do you learn to live with a thing like that? The thought that you might be responsible for someone's death.
Death? What's happened?
Elliot Carson began hemorrhaging. They may have to operate again.
Now, you listen to me. You are not to blame. No matter what happens to Elliot Carson, you are not to blame. I am. I sent Elliot after your father last night.
Well, what I don't get is how he knew exactly where to look.
Ada Jacks told him where they were going.
Where they were going?
Mother, who was with him?
Paul Hanley.
Paul Hanley. Well, he might know what triggered this whole thing.
Look, you said last night it had to be something or someone.
But we don't know.
Connie says that Paul Hanley's a very dangerous young man. In fact, she made me call your father just as soon as she found out George was drinking with him.
But why? Why would Paul Hanley want to make trouble?
Well, we may know after I talk to him. Oh, and this time, Mr. Hanley is not going to give me any double talk.
Rod.
Goodbye, Betty.
better go on, and your mother's waiting for you.
Preview from the continuing story of Peyton Place.
Can I see Mr. Carson?
Oh, well, I'm afraid that's impossible, Allison. They're going to take him up in a few minutes.
What did you say to Rodney?
Well, he came by the office today.
What did you tell Rodney?
He seemed to think you were holding something back, Les.
Never mind that. What did you say to him?
Mother, what's going on? You're scaring me.
Sit down, Allison.
What is it?
Please.